Question was, how did I get into music?
Oh,
Right. You see Mr. Barenboim.
oh yes.
Let's hope you can hear it this way. It's very quiet at the beginning, but this is the thing that kicked me off with music at the age of 14. Not this performance, but this piece, Mahler's Ninth Symphony.
Yeah.
Violas, harp, the muted horns. That at the age of 14, I heard that on the radio, and I said to my brother, who was a country and western fan, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, for God's sake, leave it alone. Get out with the girls." So, but it stayed with me, and I thought, no, I want to do that. I want to know what that is because I'd never heard anything like it. Trip down to Ilford into Bob Bell's music shop and uh, asked if he knew anything about Mahler. And it's interesting, his response was exactly the same as my brother's, which was, "What do you want to do that for? What do you want to get out with the girls?" So I said, "No, I want to know how you do that." And then he's kind of changed and he said, "Well, listen here, clever bugger." And from then on, he called me clever bugger all the time. He said, "If you want to know about that," he said, "it's a lifetime study. And once you think you know it all, you don't know it all, clever bugger, because there's always some other clever bugger who's coming up with something new every bloody year." Anyway, that was my introduction into the process of music. And unbeknown to myself as a 14-year-old, and at that time I had a Saturday job washing up in a local wimpy bar, which was just next door to Bob Bell's shop. Unbeknown to me, he actually purchased all Mahler scores for the symphonies from 1 to 9 and the first movement of the 10th, and kept them under his counter. And it was only years later that he said, "I bought them all because I knew you'd be there and you'd come in and you'd want to do it." But of course, I couldn't read music. I had no idea how any of that happened. So going in to the shop, and he said, "Well, you know, you've got to learn about how to read music. You can't just not just think you can hear something. How are you going to communicate that to other people? And if you want to know that, you've got to study it. So this is what you've got to do." And he reeled off a load of books, and in particular, the Walter Piston, who is an American composer, Walter Piston's Orchestration, Harmony and Counterpoint. And he also had these books, and I'd give him 19 and sixpence and he'd give me a book. And I remember one day, well, very, very early on, and I've still got all these books. I've got a book in my hand, and the question came up, how do I learn from a book in my hand? And he was like, he said, "Give me that here, give me that." I can still clearly see him. He put it on the counter and he licked his finger and he went to the first chapter and he took a pen and he'd written on it, "Right, on this one you write June. Move to the next chapter, you write July. Move to the next chapter, you write August. And don't you go beyond that, even if you think you know it, because you don't know it, clever bugger. You got to keep going over and over and over all this stuff. And when you've learnt it all, you still don't know it, because you've got to." He taught me through the whole process of how to learn, how to absorb information, how to take a fact or an idea or a sound and do something with it. And all these exercises and things about ear training and learning about what things sounded like and how you communicate that sound to someone else. So as a 14-year-old, he then one day he said to me, you want to do this, you're studying this stuff, you're teaching yourself, and you've got to earn a living out of it. So what are you going to do? And I had no idea. And he got the Melody Maker newspaper, which was the newspaper for the music industry. And he went to the back of it and he said, there you go, look, there, all those jobs, they're there. And it was publishing companies that were looking for lead sheet writers. Now, a lead sheet is a piece of music that has the melody of a song with the words underneath and the chords over the top. It's called a top line or a lead sheet. And those are written that way so that composers can register with the Performing Rights Society, and publishers register with the Performing Rights Society. But someone's got to do them, and they pay. You're not looking at everything else. And he said it's good ear training. So I got in touch with, I've written this down, Schroeder Music at the age of 15, because he said that's what you got to do. So I got in touch with them to say that epilepsy was still very prevalent in my life, and there wasn't a day that went by without the Grand Mal event. But you just go with it. There's there's nothing else and besides that was normal for me. That was my normal life. I just went along with that. So and I'd only just been out of that hospital that I'd been in since I was 4 years old, just really recently as a 14-year-old. So I went into London, and my mum was not too happy about that, me doing it on my own. And I said to her, look, no, I've got to do this. I want to do this. And, Dad and my mum and my brothers, who didn't know me because they'd never grown up with me and I hadn't grown up with them. And they said, what are you doing this for? And my father kept saying, you've not studied, lad. You've got to study. And I said, well, that's what I'm doing. Yeah, but you've got to go to college and university and all that, and it's not for you. And I thought, well, I didn't think it. I just said, well, bollocks to that. I'm going to do this. This is what I want to do. So I went up to Ganshill Station on the tube into London and met with a guy called Dick James at Southern Music. And all he did was he said, okay, there's an acetate, which is the precursor of a recording, the actual vinyl recording. And he said, I want you to write out what you hear there. There's a gramophone in there. There's a seat and a desk. You go in there and you've got an hour. I listened to the thing, and because of the training that had been happening so far in terms of ear training and so on that I've been doing, and writing in terms of the graphics of music on the page, wrote out what I heard and gave it to him. And he said, that's good. Right. Okay. You're on a retainer, £5 a week. And we'll give you £2.50 per, well, it was the equivalent of £2.50. It was before decimalisation at that point. But what fascinated me was the music industry, the way in which people required all these other folk to give them the basis for their own materials. So, yep, I started doing that. And then it's all serendipity as well. It's who you meet at that moment who requires something at that moment and tests you. So I was in a place called Young Blood Music, and this would have been, 1964. And 15 and a half, getting on for. And Mickey Dallin at Young Blood said, you've got a good hand there. Nikki Welsh is coming in later. And Nikki Welsh I'd heard of as an arranger who worked a lot with Dorothy Squires and Lena Martell and the people of this ilk, who was an arranger and a wartime arranger in the big bands and so on. And he needs a copyist because we're recording tomorrow and he needs the copyist. When Nicky came in with his score, he said, have you ever copied before? I said, no, I haven't copied before. Anyway, he showed me that each of the staves has a separate line on it. And, you take a piece of manuscript paper and each of the instruments it can't be given a full score because they'd be forever turning pages. So a copyist isolates that one piece for each of the instruments. So he sat me down, manuscript paper, and showed me how to do this. So I did that. Said, that's great. And that opened another door